All right, I get to say this now for the first time. NewsNation's Katie Pavlich, host of Katie Pavlich Tonight, which will make its debut later this month here on the network. Very excited to have you. We had this big rollout plan for you. Breaking news changes everything. We're glad
Yes, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
There we go. That's the big rollout. Help us understand. I think for the first time, we have now seen what the mission is as regards to Venezuela. Do we have a clear idea of what success, not just grabbing Maduro, looks like, but what this administration views as success overall for Venezuela?
Well, there are, I would say, a number of missions that the administration has put into play here. The first, of course, is that Maduro is a criminal who has a 25-page indictment from the Department of Justice that comes after another set of charges was issued in 2020 against him under the Biden administration. So this is someone who's never been legitimately acknowledged by the United States. He has always been on the run, although they've tolerated him in a number of ways, and that came to an end today. So that's the issue of the president staying on the campaign trail when he was running for re-election, that we were not going to tolerate this kind of narco-terrorism. You've seen the lead up to this. Of course, the administration classified Maduro's regime and a number of the gangs inside of Venezuela as terrorist organizations in order to get some more runway for the military to be able to act against these kinds of groups. So there's that part of it, the criminality portion of it. Then, of course, you have the human side of it, the Venezuelans who he talked about today in that press conference. You know, a number of millions of people have fled the country who want to go back to the country. I was just in Argentina actually over Christmas and New Year's, and there's a number of Venezuelans working there who wanted Maduro to go. They want to go back to their country. And then, of course, there's the geopolitical side of this that is not just about Venezuela. It's about Cuba. It's about Iran. It's about Russia. It's about China. From the Iranian perspective, you had the president and the Secretary of War today emphasizing that this could have been done the easy way, and they chose the hard way. Iran has done that on one aspect with not coming to the table to negotiate a new nuclear agreement. But they also have the president warning just before this extraction of Maduro that if the Iranian regime continues to kill protesters in their own country, that the United States will act there as well. And so there's a number of different layers here in terms of what the president has laid out. There's, of course, a lot to come and what Venezuela will look like. The president emphasized today that they are there also to regain assets were stolen in the billions of dollars by the Maduro regime that belonged to the United States of America and private companies that were taken over. So there's a lot of different layers to this.
Two things can be true at once, right? Two things can be true. One, Maduro, awful person. The world is a more just place with him behind bars. And we want the oil, too.
Right.
And the oil gives President Trump a lot of options. One thing about sort of where this goes, President Trump today said that he was not afraid of boots on the ground. That's a different President Trump 1.0 versus 2.0, right? I'm so struck by the exclusive images we have of Maduro being led in handcuffs in the Nike tracksuit in the dead of night through New York City. We don't have a side-by-side, but compared to 2018, he had a motorcade during Trump 1 in New York City to address the UN General Assembly. What is the message to the world of the difference between Trump 1.0 and 2.0?
I actually think they're pretty similar. You know, the president doesn't want forever wars. It's very different. What happened today and what has happened with the Iran strikes against the nuclear program in June was not a drawn-out escalation of putting thousands of troops overnight into the country. This is something that's being done very strategically. It's being done in a way where this is not drawn out.
Way different than, say, Iraq.
Very different than Iraq. Completely different strategy, completely different mindset. And you heard the president talk a lot about this today, and he's talked about this over the course of the past years, of the embarrassment to the United States of America of the Afghanistan withdrawal, and what he did today, which is very important. And he's been doing this since he regained the White House in January. Is he has reestablished credibility with the American military, showing the world that we will use it when we need to establish deterrence and to protect the American people. He's also increased the morale inside the military and inside the country, that Americans can be confident that when you're sending the military in as the commander-in-chief, it's going to be used for a set purpose, not for 20 years of endless talking about what could or could not happen.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.